Imagine walking into a place where everyone looks at you like you don't belong, where your clothes define your worth, and your silence becomes your label. Imagine being treated as invisible, simply because you look ordinary. Now imagine that behind those simple clothes hides a man who could change the fate of every person in that room, a millionaire, watching quietly, testing not their manners, but their humanity. This story isn't just about money. It's about the mirror that life holds up to all of us, how we see others, and how easily we forget that respect should never depend on appearance. Today, you'll hear about Thomas Reed, a man who walked into a grand bank dressed as no one, and walked out showing everyone what true wealth means. You'll see how arrogance can destroy character, and how a single act of kindness from a humble guard restored faith in humanity. But before you watch this powerful story, take a moment. Ask yourself, how would you treat someone who had nothing to offer you? Would you greet them with kindness or with judgment? If this message touches you, don't just watch. Be part of the change. Subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, and share this video so more people can understand that respect is the true currency of humanity. Together, we can make the world a place where no one is dismissed for looking less. Because one day, the person you look down on might be the one who teaches you the greatest lesson of your life. A man in simple clothes. It was a bright morning when a man in plain, slightly worn clothes walked toward the glass doors of a grand city bank. His shoes were polished but old, his shirt clean yet faded, and his expression calm. No one looking at him would guess that he owned half the buildings on that very street. His name was Thomas Reed, a self-made millionaire who had learned to hide his wealth after years of seeing how money changed people. He believed that true respect was only seen when there was nothing to gain. So that morning, he decided to visit the same bank where years ago he had begged for a small loan to start his first business. He wanted to see if time had changed the way people treated others. He wanted to see if kindness still existed behind corporate smiles. As Thomas entered, the cool air of the bank brushed his face. The marble floors gleamed, and behind the counters, employees typed busily. Customers in suits waited in line, tapping their phones impatiently. He stepped quietly toward the reception desk. "Good morning," he said with a soft voice. "I'd like to speak with the bank manager, please." The receptionist, a young woman with perfect makeup, looked him up and down. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" "No," he replied politely. "But it's an urgent matter. I just need a few minutes of his time." She frowned. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Collins doesn't meet anyone without an appointment." Her tone had that cold, practiced politeness that hides quiet judgment. Thomas nodded slowly. "I understand," he said, and moved aside. But instead of leaving, he took a seat and waited quietly. Minutes passed. People entered and left. The receptionist whispered something to a colleague and pointed at him. A few customers glanced over, assuming he was lost or poor. Still, Thomas waited. After nearly 30 minutes, the bank manager himself appeared from his glass office. A tall man with a gold watch and a sharp suit. His nameplate read Mr. Alan Collins, branch director ***. He was smiling as he shook hands with another wealthy client, but when his eyes fell on Thomas, the smile disappeared. "Excuse me," Thomas said, standing up. "Are you Mr. Collins?" "Yes, I am. What can I do for you?" The tone was already defensive. "I'd like to discuss something important about one of your investment branches," Thomas said calmly. "It concerns your recent expansion in the South District." The manager's brow furrowed. "And who are you exactly?" "My name is Thomas Reed." Collins chuckled faintly. "Mr. Reed, you said? I don't recall seeing your name in our client database." I used to be, Thomas replied. Many years ago. Collins folded his arms. Listen, Mr. Reed, we're quite busy. If you're looking for job opportunities or small loans, you'll need to speak with the credit officer downstairs. Thomas stood there silently. Around them, customers watched. The receptionist smirked, clearly enjoying the scene. No, Thomas said softly. I'm not here for a loan. Collins' impatience grew. Then what? Are you here for, exactly? To see how people like you treat others when they think no one's watching. That sentence hung in the air. Collins blinked, confused. Excuse me? But before Thomas could continue, the manager's voice rose. Sir, please don't waste my time. Security. A guard, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a kind face, approached quickly. What's the problem, Mr. Collins? This man is disturbing the staff, Collins snapped. Please escort him out. The guard looked at Thomas. Something about his calmness felt different. Sir, the guard said softly, maybe we can step outside. For a moment, Thomas smiled faintly. Of course. As they walked toward the door, the guard whispered, I'm sorry about that, sir. Some people here forget what respect means. Thomas turned his head slightly. What's your name? David, the guard said. David Carter. Thank you, David, Thomas replied. You might be the only one here who hasn't forgotten. They reached the exit, but before Thomas left, he pulled a simple card from his pocket and handed it to the guard. If you ever need anything, call this number. The guard looked down. The card had no logo, just the name * Thomas Reed *, and a phone number printed in clean, elegant letters. When Thomas left, Collins laughed to himself. People these days, he muttered, think they can just walk in and talk business. But later that afternoon, an expensive black car stopped in front of the bank. 2 men in suits stepped out, followed by the same man who had been thrown out earlier, now wearing a different air entirely. The security cameras caught the reflection of his watch, one worth more than the bank manager's car. The whispers began. Is that the same man from this morning? Someone asked. David, the guard, froze as Thomas walked back in. This time, everyone stood silently. Even the receptionist's lips parted in shock. Thomas looked directly at the manager's office, where Alan Collins stood pale behind the glass. The day was far from over. The real lesson was about to begin. The return of the unknown millionaire. When Thomas entered the bank again that afternoon, the world seemed to pause. Every eye followed him. His presence felt entirely different, composed, commanding, yet without arrogance. A man who had been dismissed as a nobody just hours earlier was now walking beside 2 professional assistants carrying briefcases. The receptionist's fingers trembled slightly as she spoke. Good afternoon, sir. Can I? Thomas gave her a gentle nod. Thank you. I'm here to see Mr. Collins. Before she could reply, Collins himself appeared at the office door, forcing a smile. Mr. Reed, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. No, Thomas said calmly. I imagine you didn't. The tension in the room was thick. The same customers who had smirked earlier now looked guilty, pretending to check their phones. Collins gestured toward his office. Please, come in. Inside, the air conditioning hummed softly. Thomas sat across the polished mahogany desk, resting his hands calmly on his knees. Collins tried to maintain control. Mr. Reed, I must apologize for any misunderstanding earlier today. Things have been busy, and Thomas raised his hand. You don't need to apologize, Mr. Collins. You acted according to what you saw. The problem, he paused, is that you only saw the surface. Collins blinked, unsure what to say. Thomas continued. When I first came here years ago, I was a small business owner, with nothing but an idea. I asked for a small loan. Your bank denied me, saying I didn't look capable of repaying. So I built everything without you. And today I own several companies, including the one that just acquired this bank's regional branch. Colin's mouth opened slightly. You what? Thomas leaned forward. Your bank's ownership changed hands last week. The papers were signed yesterday. I'm your new regional chairman. For a few seconds, silence filled the room. Colin's face drained of color. A man who had called security on him was now his superior. Outside the office, whispers grew louder. The receptionist's hand covered her mouth. David, the guard, watched quietly from near. The door, his heart racing. Colin stood, stammering. I didn't mean to disrespect you, sir. I truly didn't know who you were. Thomas' voice was calm, but firm. That's the point, Mr. Collins. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect. He stood up and walked toward the glass door, looking out at the hall, filled with onlookers. You see those people? Every day, someone like me walks in. Someone who may look ordinary, but carries dreams you can't imagine. And too often, they leave feeling small because of people like you. His words echoed through the hall. No one dared to move. Then Thomas turned toward David, the guard. Mr. Carter, he called softly. Could you step inside for a moment? David hesitated, then entered. He looked nervous but respectful. Yes, sir? Thomas smiled. Earlier today, you were the only man here who treated me with dignity when you had no reason to. I haven't forgotten that. Colin swallowed hard, understanding what was about to happen. Thomas continued, I'd like to offer you a position on my security team at the regional office. Better pay, better hours, and the respect you deserve. David's eyes widened. Sir, I don't know what to say. Just say yes, Thomas said kindly. Yes, sir, thank you. The staff watched as Thomas shook David's hand firmly. The small act of recognition felt like a thunderclap in the silent room. Collins tried to salvage his pride. Mr. Reed, I assure you, this will never happen again. I'll make sure my staff learns from this. Thomas looked at him for a long moment. That's good, because next time, you might not get a second chance. He turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. Oh, and Mr. Collins, he said without looking back. Effective immediately, you'll be transferred to a smaller branch. Perhaps there, you'll have more time to practice humility. The manager froze, realizing the weight of this statement. The room was utterly still as Thomas walked out, his steps echoing across the marble floor. When he reached the door, David followed to open it for him, but Thomas stopped him. No, David, he said softly. Walk beside me. Together, they stepped into the sunlight. The city outside buzzed with life, unaware that a quiet lesson had just unfolded inside that building. A lesson about respect, kindness, and the invisible power of decency. As they reached the car, one of Thomas's assistants whispered, Sir, that was quite a statement. Thomas looked out the window and said, No, that was justice, the kind that doesn't need to shout. Inside the bank, employees stood frozen, replaying every moment of the morning in their minds. For some, it was a day of shame. For others, a day of awakening. And for one man, the humble guard, it was the beginning of a new life. The lesson that money couldn't buy. The next morning, news of the event spread quietly across the city. Bank employees spoke in hushed tones, and customers shared the story online. A millionaire. Disguised as a common man exposed arrogance at the city bank. No one knew the full truth, but everyone felt the moral weight of it. In a world obsessed with appearances, one man had reminded them that value doesn't wear labels. Thomas Reed sat by the window of his office, overlooking the skyline. The same sun that had shone on him as a nobody yesterday now illuminated his success, but he didn't smile with pride. His mind replayed the look on David's face when he offered him the new job. That moment, not the punishment of Collins, was what mattered most to him. When David entered the office later that day, he still seemed overwhelmed. "Sir," he said quietly, "I still can't believe what happened. I'm just a security guard. I didn't do much." Thomas looked up from his desk. "You did everything, David. You showed what it means to be human. You reminded me why I hid my identity in the first place. To see if the world still had people like you." David smiled humbly. "My father used to say, respect doesn't cost a penny, but it can make a man rich. I just tried to live by that." Thomas nodded. "Your father was a wise man. I think we've both learned something this week, that wealth means nothing if it doesn't bring dignity." There was a brief silence before Thomas continued. "Do you know what happened to Mr. Collins?" David shook his head. "No, sir." "I transferred him to a smaller branch," Thomas said, "but not to punish him, to give him space to change. Everyone deserves a second chance, even those who forget what kindness looks like." David looked surprised. "You're a good man, sir." Thomas smiled faintly. "I try to be fair. Goodness isn't measured by how much you give, but by how much you forgive." That afternoon, Thomas asked his assistant to prepare something unusual, a public letter. It wasn't about wealth or business. It was a message addressed to everyone who had ever been judged by appearance. The letter read, Asterisk, to those who wear old shoes but walk with pride, to those who wait patiently even when ignored, and to those who show respect when none is shown back, you are the real measure of success. The richest people are not those who own banks, but those who own compassion. Asterisk. He signed it simply. Asterisk, Thomas Reed Asterisk. The letter went viral within hours. People across the city, and later across the world, shared it. Many didn't know who Thomas Reed really was, but the message resonated deeply. It wasn't about money. It was about humanity. Days later, a small envelope arrived at Thomas's office. Inside was a handwritten note. It was from Alan Collins. Asterisk, Mr. Reed. Asterisk it read, asterisk, I want to thank you for not firing me. That day changed my life. I've spent the past week volunteering at a shelter, and I've seen what real humility looks like. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I'm trying to earn it. Asterisk, Thomas folded the letter carefully and smiled. He learned, he whispered. That's all I ever wanted. In the following months, the story of the millionaire who hid his identity became a lesson in business schools and leadership seminars. Executives quoted him, employees respected him, and people began to rethink how they treated others. But Thomas didn't seek fame or applause. He continued living simply, walking among people without guards or luxury cars. Sometimes David joined him for coffee at a small cafe near the park. They talked about life, about how fragile respect could be, and how easily people forgot the simplest truths. One evening, as the sun set and the streets turned golden, David asked, Sir, do you ever wish people knew who you really are? Thomas took a sip of his coffee and smiled. No, David, because if they did, they'd treat me differently. And then I'd never know who's genuine. David nodded. That's true. It's strange, isn't it? The richest man in the city walks around unnoticed. Thomas chuckled softly. That's exactly how I like it. They sat in silence for a moment, watching people hurry by, some rushing home from work, others scrolling their phones, a few helping strangers cross the street. Life went on, chaotic yet beautiful. Finally, Thomas spoke again, almost to himself. Do you know the secret of peace, David? David looked at him curiously. What is it, sir? knowing your worth, Thomas said quietly, but never needing to prove it. The city lights began to flicker on as the day ended. Somewhere, in a small apartment, a young man struggling to build his dream would read Thomas's story and find hope. Somewhere else, a manager would remember to smile at the next stranger who walked through the door. And somewhere, an old man would whisper to his son, "Respect doesn't cost a penny, but it can make a man rich." The world hadn't changed overnight. But because of one quiet act of humility and one act of kindness, it had taken a small step toward becoming better. And for Thomas Reed, that was worth more than all the money he had ever made.